G'day everyone, welcome back to another weekly tipping video on the channel. I'm going to be going over my tips for round 23 of this 2026 AFL season. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you do go on to enjoy, and let's begin. Rightio, let's have a look at my tips from the previous round, that being round 22. Not the greatest score, just the 5 out of 9, a few 50-50s I wasn't able to get right. I felt quite bullish on North, but just couldn't quite trust them. Should have tipped them in the end. A very important win for their season as the Dogs do go down, but they're still locked in for the top 10. We'll see how they fare. The Hawks, too bullish on them. It's hard to go against Brisbane, especially off a bounce back, and there you go, a real strong performance. And then, yeah, the D's against the Dockers. They continue that terrific record of the G. One of the games of the season. Really could have gone either way. The Dockers' effort was substantially good as well. And the Swans over Port Adelaide, Geelong over Essendon, and Adelaide only narrowly over the Tigers. All pretty straightforward tips there. Then for the Sunday games, the Suns make it 2-0 in the Expansion Cup this year with a close and gritty win down in a wet in cold Canberra. The Pies getting it done with a more younger team against the Eagles away, and the Blues a powerful performance against the Saints. With Nas going down, is their season done? And we'll now have a quick look at my tipping competition leaderboard update. As for the scores for round 22, only one person got themselves a full 9 out of 9 score. 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐴 2049. What an effort, considering there were some tricky tips throughout this round. And as for who is leading my competition, we have a new leader at the minute. It is 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐴 with the total score narrowly leading by 144. Let's now begin with the tips for round 23, second last round. We start on the Friday night, no Thursday night game this week like we usually have. It is the Dockers hosting the Crows over at Optus Stadium. The Dockers still maintain their spot on top of the ladder, even with that loss against the Demons. What a game that was. Really could have gone either way. One of the games of the season. If Frederick kicks that goal late, they probably seal the victory. He misses, and then the Demons go on to win it. With Alex Pearce being rested in that game, their defence no doubt looked a lot more hollow. You'd think he'd be able to stop a few more goals if he was back there. And it led to one of their more shakier defensive performances of this season, whilst they've been a really rock-solid defence pretty much all season long. So expecting to fire up and bounce back, and Pearce to come back into this fixture here facing the Crows, where they did get a win and expect to win against the Tigers, but it was in a very unconvincing manner. As a wet and pretty bad conditions game on Saturday night against the Tigers, but they found a way, ranking out a huge second half. But it feels like it's a bit of the same problems creeping in for the Crows. With they looked quite boring, weren't very dynamic with their ball movement, and look, the conditions obviously didn't help to that, but they certainly looked to shell themselves on Saturday night. But the win's a win. It's a great opportunity here to try and continue to push towards a possible top 4 place if they can knock off the Dockers here. They're coming off a loss, who knows? Need a strong midfield effort if there are any chance here, Adelaide. They have posed themselves as one of the better contest and pressure sides in the league, but it's a little bit volatile, their midfield. Some games it can look fantastic, other games it can look a little bit iffy. So it's almost like, what kind of Adelaide are we going to get? Because Freo's midfield, they're so well balanced, they're tough as nails in there, they rarely lose the contested possession battle. And whilst I could definitely see Adelaide be a chance in this game, they've got Darcy Fogarty coming back in the lineup, who's a big presence in that forward half. They've got some dangerous weapons in that area of the field. They could potentially eke out a result here if their pressure is up and about, and they are one of the higher ranked defences in the competition. But at home here for the Dockers, I expect them to bounce back coming off that loss. They'll get Pearce back in, they'll be fired up, and I reckon they'll be that touch too good over Adelaide, out tough and also outclass them in a quality game. But yeah, the second half for Freo have been very good. I think they can roll past them. So I'll tip the Dockers in this one, and they run away with it and win this one by 17. For the Saturday games now, first one up at 12:35 PM, we have Richmond hosting the Saints at the MCG. The Tigers, their last 2 weeks have been much better, coming off a win against the Eagles and a gallant defeat against the Crows. Nobody gave the Tigers a chance to get on top of the Crows, and they almost ended up winning the game. They were tough as nails in the midfield, and they had some good cameos with their smalls. Seth Campbell kicking 3 goals in a row. Even Jack Ross arguably coming off one of his better performances of the season. They'll be facing St Kilda here, who had a potential season-ending loss against the Blues. It felt like it was the dagger in the heart, especially with 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐴 going down with that hamstring pull, and he's going to be out for the rest of the season. So that's a big blow to their finals chances. Even if they win their last 2 games, they have to rely on results to get in. But as soon as Nas went down, it was hard to see him get on top of that contest over the Blues. They did okay to keep themselves head above the water throughout the first 3 quarters, but the dam will eventually burst. It was one of their worst defensive performances of the season. They couldn't contain Carlton's ball movement whatsoever. 𝐼𝐿𝐼𝐿 had a pretty quiet game back there, and the issues again continue with that forward line not having a big enough presence. Higgins bobbed up here or there, but he was pretty inaccurate with his goal kicking. Got outclassed and out-toughed against the Blues, but a good opportunity to bounce back here against Richmond. The last 2 weeks, as I say again, has been quite sound, but this is a game on paper they surely still should be winning even without Wayne getting Miller up. They've got some good youngsters in there who continue to impress. Hall had a pretty commendable performance on the weekend against the Blues, and 𝐼𝐿𝐼𝐿 always scraps in there well. Boxall and Wilson could be one that benefits quite well with a lot more midfield time too. It wouldn't shock me if this turns out to be a bit of a close game. The Tigers have troubled the Saints in the past. It was a close win for the Saints, I'm pretty sure, around this time last year at the G. The Tigers scrap well in the contested game. Can they gain some ascendancy off that? But I'd expect the Saints on paper still to find a way to win this game, even with the qualities without 𝐼𝐿𝐼𝐿. And their season is still technically alive, so a lot to play for here for the Saints, and it'd be hard to see them stuff up here against the Tigers. And I think they're good enough to out-tough the Tigers around the ball, because they've got a hard-nosed, hard-working, disciplined midfield and can outrun this young Richmond team. So I'll tip the Saints in this one, but yeah, I think this could be a bit of a scrappy game. I'll go St Kilda by 14. Next game up at 3:45 p.m. at Marvel Stadium, we have North Melbourne hosting the 𝐼𝐶𝐞. This could potentially be a bit of a banana peel game for Geelong, because on paper this is a game we all expect Geelong to win with what they do offer in terms of qualities. But yeah, the Kangas, their last 6 weeks or so has been competitive against the better sides. Yes, they've lost a chunk of these games, but they've finally got a much needed win to keep the spirits up against the Dogs. As we continue to say, they've been challenging opposition as well with their ball movement, and it's exactly what we saw against the Dogs. Really exposed them in their back 50, and although we unfortunately saw the inevitable leading the opposition back into the game for the Kangas, they did well to keep the Doggies at bay with a powerful 4th quarter. So although their season is mathematically over, I'm sure the Kangas will want to finish off the season strong with Geelong and Sydney to come here. Can they have some strong performances against some top 8 opposition? No doubt will be a tough test facing the Cats here, who are in some really good form. 4 wins on the trot. Even without Max Holmes and Jeremy Cameron, they've been able to play some really cohesive and powerful, hard-running football. Polkinghorne's coming to the side, made a huge impact. Shane Neal's been clunking them well, and their front half game continues to be so dangerous. Their pressure is fantastic. They turn the ball over in dangerous spots and make you pay. And this is the issue for North Melbourne. They've had some shaky defensive performances this year. They can't afford to have bad turnovers. Assuming we'll see a Sheen Mullen go on somebody like Luke Davies-Uniacke, and does potentially Fiona Sutherland maybe get a Bailey Smith here. So at Marvel here, this is where North arguably play their best football. It wouldn't shock me if they can push the Cutters here. They did earlier this season. They were leading after half-time down at the Cattery. Their ball movement has been strong. I think they can push Geelong throughout patches of this game, but from a 4-quarter point of view, with Geelong's form, I expect them to click in the gear if needed and find a way to put the Kangas to the sword here with a professional win. So yeah, gallant performance I reckon for the Kangas, but yeah, Geelong just too class here, and we'll tip the Cutters here by 27 points. Next game up at 4:15 p.m, we have the Q clash. Brisbane hosting the Suns up there at the Gabba. Brisbane sitting in 4th and Gold Coast 14th. 10 losses in a row, but they finally got a much needed win for the first time in a long time down there in Canberra. Gutsy 2-point victory over the Giants, and their midfield a lot better. They dominated in clearances for the most part against the Giants, and a lot of it was to do with Matt Rial's insane performance. He had 17 clearances himself and around 40 touches or something like that. A huge stat line there. So when they desperately needed the Suns, but it's going to be a tough test here against the bigger brother of the Brisbane Lions. They are sitting in 4th place and continue to set themselves up for a potentially good September finish. 4 wins out of their last 5. A much needed strong response against the Hawks. They were tough as nails around the ball and had one of their better defensive performances of the season against Hawthorn. They were leading throughout most parts of that game. The inside 50s, the Hawks, but was strong back there, able to repel and outclass them back the other way with some efficient entries. And as we've been saying with this Brisbane side, there's so many front half plays in some good form. Logan Morris, Kai Lohman, I think he's like top 8 in the Coleman at the minute. What a season he is having, especially in the back half of the year. It's a Q clash, so expect both sides to bring the scrap here. Can't quite see the Suns going with Brisbane, though, from a tipping point of view. I think they can push them, but yeah, Brisbane, with the form they're in, this stage of the season, they need to win to keep their top 4 hopes alive. Yeah, I think they'll be too tough around the ball and outclass them going forward with so many of those front half players in some good form. So I'll tip Brisbane in this one, and they should be too good here for the Suns, and we'll tip them by 25 points. For the Saturday games now, first game up at 7:40 p.m, we have Hawthorn hosting the Pies at the MCG. The Hawks coming off a pretty dismal defeat against the Lions, and is this the kind of loss that inevitably means are they good enough to go all the way? Because that's a really damning loss. Certainly one of the worst performances of the season. Inside 50 execution, what on earth? They've been so good moving the ball the last couple of weeks, but there you go. That's what happens when you play the low-ranked sides. It didn't look like Hawthorn whatsoever. I mean, they did well field position-wise. They were winning the inside 50s throughout most parts of the game, but couldn't execute. So expect them to, bounce back here, because they're a lot better than that. Facing the Pies, who definitely give you looks. They are one of the lowest-ranked sides with conceding inside 50s. They give up a lot of field position, but it's defending the inside 50 entries where they're very strong at the Pies. And even with all those outs last week, with the likes of 𝐼𝐴 and 𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵, 𝗏𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐵𝗏, it was a very sound performance against the Eagles. They were pushed early on, as we sort of expected, but they found a way, clicked into gear in that third quarter, and were able to keep the Eagles at bay. Daicos continues such a sublime season. In fact, his brother of Josh also had a pretty good game too. Darcy Cameron in the ruck's been in great form as of late, and it was a win also contributed heavily with the exuberance of youth as well for the Pies. They're expected to get a few bins back in this week, especially throughout the midfield with the 𝐼𝐴 and 𝗏𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵 expected to come back into this game. So much more stronger side in this one against the Hawks for the Pies at the 𝐬𝐴𝐞𝐿, arguably where they play their best football. Although the Hawks are currently tipped at 86%, I see this one being a lot more closer than what it should be, because obviously the Pies pushed them earlier this season, as well as being one of the high-ranked defensive teams in the competition. They could definitely keep Hawthorn at bay if they are good enough. Hawks defence was at sea last week, and the Pies exposed that through some of their quick slingshot footballers they can showcase at the G. I've got that gut feeling the Pies could find a way, even with their inclusions. But I'll lean my tip here towards the Hawks. They're coming off a pretty dismal loss, and they're a lot better than that, as I did state before. They'll be fired up, and they'll want to retain their spot within the top three. So I'll tip the Hawks in this one. I think they should be too good with their quality in the front half. A bounce back here for the Hawks over the Pies in a game that's scrappy, but they run away with it, I think, Hawthorn, and win this one by 19. Then for the other Saturday night game at 8:10 p.m, we have Port Adelaide hosting the Demons at the Adelaide Oval. As we've seen this year, Port Adelaide, for the most part, have been a hard side to knock off at the Adelaide Oval. So this is potentially a danger game for the Demons. I say potentially because it feels like a lot more of a danger game if Port were a lot more full strength, with Butters out, with of course Rosie out this whole season. So many of their best 23 is out. It arguably felt like a Sandville side out there last week against the Swans, even though they lost by 97 points. I think that also has to do with personnel. They clearly didn't look like themselves whatsoever. They've been a hard down to break side, a strong defensive team, and we saw that the first quarter and a half, but Sydney's power ran away with it and had a heavy defeat in the end. But yeah, how do they fare for the rest of this season? Put Adelaide with their outs. So yeah, made some really good progression, I think, under Josh 𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵. They clearly need to improve their list and evolve their list with more talent coming in, you'd think, through the off-season. But I'd expect them to keep on scrapping and working hard and pushing opposition to finish off the year, given that's what they've done well under Josh 𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵. The Demons, though, coming off what a win that was against the Dockers. It felt like Freo, throughout stages of the game, they'll run away with it now. They've got a few goals lead, but they continue to will and get themselves back in the contest, the Demons. Their ground level game smashed the Dockers. I think post-clearance, they won the ground balls by about 20, which is a huge number. It goes to show they outworked and outnumbered the Dockers in contests ahead of the ball, and found a way again through their well-balanced forward line to kick some scores. It was a pretty dismal day from the tools, but you had the likes of Bailey Laurie bob up with some important cameos, Harry Sharp with that soccer goal. So yeah, there's such a well-balanced team, the Demons. That's what I'm really liking. It's not necessarily the most talented side, and that was the issues for the Melbourne heading this year, but Stephen King's got them playing some great football. So yeah, like as I say again, it could maybe be a danger game here, but with all these outs, they're banged up Port Adelaide. I think they push them for a quarter or two, but the Demons, I think they'll be too quality here for Port Adelaide. We'll tip the Demons here in a convincing win by 38 points. For the Sunday games now, first game up at 1:40 p.m. at AG Stadium with the Giants hosting the Eagles. Of course, when these two sides played earlier this season, the Eagles found a way to win against the Giants. It was through their terrific front half pressure, stifled the Giants' ball movement, as sides have been able to do well this year and find a way to win. This one will be trickier though on the road, and it's a GWS side coming off a close loss against the Gold Coast Suns. Although their effort was really good, just weren't able to execute, and that has been the problem with this Giants team throughout this season. The inconsistencies with their execution, and especially their ball movement as well. Another consecutive game where their midfield gets beaten, the clearances, the absence of Callahan's definitely hurting. And speaking of their midfield, Xavier Halloran's been getting a lot of midfield time as of late, but he'll be out with a hamstring problem, so that's a bit of a blow. So it continues to be such an unpredictable Giants team. Who knows what we'll get in this contest? They could come out and absolutely belt the Eagles with their qualities, but also they're a very vulnerable team. And the Eagles, of course, beating the Giants, as we said earlier this season. On the road, it'll be tough for especially a young West Coast side. Can they find a way. I thought their effort was pretty solid against the Pies, against one of the better defences in the competition. They still found a way to almost kick 100 points. The ball movement in the first half, where has that been this whole season? They were looking really fluid and entertaining. But it's what you get with a young team, their inability to play 4 quarters, and this is what could hurt against the Giants. But this one has unpredictability written all over it, given the inconsistencies with both these sides. I think the Eagles could definitely push them here through their strong work rate, and they've got some plays in there that can be game changers. I know 𝐼𝐴𝐷𝐿 is so iffy with his goal kicking, but he's still a big presence in that forward line. You've got Reid running through there. If this one was in Perth, I wouldn't mind doing a cheeky tip here on the Eagles, but away from home, I think the Giants will find a way here through what they do possess in that side. They've still got some match winners themselves. Can they show a lot more of a consistent performance here with some of their execution going forward? I think they can against a bit of a weaker Eagles defence. I'll tip the Giants in this one here. Scrappy game, but they run away with it, I reckon, and win this one by 24. Next game up at 3:15pm, we have the Dogs hosting the Blues at Marvel Stadium. Another big contest here for Carlton. If they win this, they are in. They will make the top 10, but they need to find a way here against a plucky Dogs outfit. 2 losses in a row now for the Western Bulldogs, and this is where they're at. Quite simple as that. Without Sam Darcy, they're clearly lacking a big presence forward of the ball. Haven't been able to hit the peak of their powers attacking-wise from last year, and simply looking like an average team, not trying to make it a derogatory term. I'm sure Western Bulldogs supporters can even agree with that, and that was a sour defeat last week against North Melbourne. They defensively were very poor. They all got walked over, let's be honest, against this Kangas team. So with what their form suggests, it will be definitely a tough one here against the Blues. They're flying at the minutes. Although they had some disappointing losses against the Hawks and the Pies, they've rebounded well, playing some attractive football, attacking and defensive-wise. They've been tough as nails around the ball. They don't necessarily have to win clearances anymore. It's the quality with their ball movement is where it's been so impressive, and that's exactly what we saw against the Saints, hitting targets well. 𝐼𝐴𝐷𝐿, he's kicking straight in the minute too. We're continuing to see the exuberance of youth. I know Taylor Burton didn't have a big game, but they're getting some presence through some of the youngsters, Smith and Harry Dean back there. Some of his foot skills looking very clean in the minute too. Bit of a dilemma with Jacob 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐪 in the moment as well. Surely he does come back in, but Dirksen and Dean back there hold down the fort okay. So they're down on form, the Dogs, but they are still locked into the top 10. They will play in September, so they need to sharpen up and find a way to play some good football here. As we all know, they've got some weapons through that midfield with Bontempelli and Richards that can change a game. I've got some youngsters that can bob up with some good moments and have a crack with the likes of Artie Jones and Josh Dolan. Their midfield, for the most part, has been disappointing this year against the sides in form and the high-ranked teams. It's been exposed, and with what are Carlton doing at the minute with their strong running and ball movement, it could definitely catch out the Doggies here. Ultimately, you still can't fully trust Carlton yet, but with the form they're in, it's too good to ignore. They're playing some confident football, and against a weak Dogs defence, I struggle to see them put a winning score here against the Blues unless they do fall into their shells, which maybe could be the case, but yeah, again, I think their form's too good. I'll tip Carlton this one. I think they can out-tough and outrun, outclass this Dogs outfit, and whilst it's even early on, the Blues be too powerful in the end and win this one by 23. And for the final game of the round at 4:40pm, we have Essendon hosting the Swans at the MCG. First time both these sides are playing this year. The Dons on the bottom of the ladder. As for Sydney, win this and they're pretty much locked into the top 2. I am pretty sure they need to win at least one out of their last 2. But yeah, both these sides can have some interesting battles throughout the seasons. The Dons usually get up for these games against the Swans, but yeah, it's late in the season. The end of the season can't come soon enough for this young Essendon team. They had a pretty solid second half, somewhat against Geelong, even though they took their foot off the pedal. It's good to see their effort not waver after barely scoring a goal in the first half. Viggo Vicentini had a sound performance in the ruck. Does he continue to ruck here, or will Nick Bryan come back into the team? And as for the Swans, Brady Grundy is expected to come back into this lineup. Do they retain Will Green, the debutant, who was pretty competitive against Port? They've had some good performances this year, the Dons, in terms of winning clearance. Can they do it here against Sydney? It's a volatile midfield, as we have been saying with this Sydney outfit. It wouldn't shock me if they can set the tone here, the Dons, especially at the G, and get some exuberance of youth through there, some pressure in the forward half. But from a four-quarter point of view, I can't see quality-wise them going with the Swans here unless they can, turn it into a bit of a scrap and get the game on their terms. But yeah, Sydney here, the Swans have won their past 3 games in a row here. They've got some threats in that forward line. Jai Sarong's been moving through the midfield, which has been good to see, adding some extra versatility into his game, even without James Rowbottom in that midfield at the moment for the Swans. I think they should be too good in terms of quality here, Sydney, and put this young Essendon team to the sword. So Sydney to win this game in the end by 40 points. So everyone, they were my tips for round 23 of this 2026 AFL season. Let me know your tips down below in the comments section. Always love to hear your people's opinions. Just 2 rounds to go and then right into finals, so keen for that of course. Hopefully you did enjoy, lads, and until next time, I'll talk to you later. See you later, fellas.